So the talk has two parts. The first will be about Cotswold sheep and the history of long-wool sheep. And then the second part gets kind of philosophical. So I'll talk about the history of sheep. I keep Cotswold sheep. They're a rare breed sheep now. Long-wool sheep were the sheep that were the backbone, I guess is that the right word, and were the mainstay of the British, English woolen industry for probably 3 or 4 centuries. I'll explain in a while they fell out of fashion. They're a beautiful sheep. I got them because they're rare breeds and because they were on the Rare Breeds Canada's critical list. They're off the critical list and I think they're just more than endangered now. That means that there's between 30 and 100 purebred Cotswolds registered every year. But if you compare that to the number of sheep in Canada, it's almost nothing. So there are 10 kinds of long-wool sheep, and they're all in danger of disappearing, which is a terrible shame because they're wonderful sheep, and they make the most wonderful fibre yarn in the world. Okay. So when I talk about Cotswolds, you could interchangeably use the term Lincoln, and that's another long-wool sheep. There are, I said, about 10. So a lot of what I say would refer to long-wool sheep in general, and not just Cotswolds. But the Cotswolds are reputedly having been brought to England by the Romans, and no doubt they were bred with local sheep and all of that. And you don't hear a lot about Cotswold sheep or the records until you come after the Normans. And then it's not particularly the use of the term Cotswold, but they start developing these long-wool sheep then. One of the things that happened back there that might be of interest today is they created a thing called the staple. Now we all think of staple as the length of the fibre, but actually it was a monopoly on the export of fibre, because the crown, the English ruling class, what would be the king, I guess that word, decided that it would be very useful to be able to get a tariff on all the wool that was exported. And I think this reminds you of somebody today who also thinks it might be illegal. But instead of putting a tariff on stuff going in, they made everybody pay a tariff going out, and you could only export, you could only sell wool through this staple. Okay. They still have something like that going in England today called the I think it's the British Wool Board or Wool Marketing Board, and if what I read is correct, if you have more than 4 sheep, you can't sell your wool directly, but you have to go through a marketing board. That's not true for Scotland, I believe. This is just true for England. Anyway, one of the great advantages is this was a great money maker, because back then, sheep were kept for their fibre, and we have no appreciation of just how valuable fibre was. Okay? Because we don't think about wool as being that valuable. It was incredibly valuable. Meat was secondary, if a concern at all. It was the wool that was important. And so important was the wool, okay, that Henry V of Shakespeare fame, remember him, that Levantian court, what was it for King George, Prince George, no, St. George, what it was. Anyway, apparently, 2/3 of Henry V's income came from wool, taxes that they would levy on wool. Now, the English crown really liked this idea, because if they wanted to wage war or raise an army or do some military expenditure, as time went on, they didn't have to go to Parliament. That would be a little bit later. They didn't have to go to Parliament to raise money. They got so much money through putting a levy on all the export of fibre. So where would that fibre go? Well, apparently it went to Flanders and Italy, where wool was processed. They were the places where the very high quality textiles. Okay. Eventually, they created some policies where they encouraged wool production in England, and that, I guess, would have been coming into the 1600s or 1700s. And so they created more kind of levies that you couldn't import stuff. So quite a force. And again, this kind of does remind us of Donald Trump, because he's trying to create a new industry in the United States where they wanted to create a wool industry in England, and which they did most successfully. And a fortune, many fortunes were made on wool in those days. One reads that a lot of the really great cathedrals were built from money generated from the production of wool. And these would have been long-wool sheep. There is a little bit of an irony for me there, because these Cotswold sheep that would have helped finance the English activities in Ireland, where the money that came from sheep in England would have bought land in Ireland or evicted the tenants in Ireland. But leaving that aside, we move on. So this long-wool sheep was actually almost like the most valuable activity there was in England in terms of industrial activity. Of course, you know, we think industry now is factories, but back then it wouldn't have been a factory at all. So what else? So yes, so that then the wool in the 1600s especially was exported initially to Flanders and Italy, and then that was curtailed as there was a policy by the Crown to encourage wool production in England, and that was enormously successful and really, when I said, was part of what drove the success of the English Empire, or the British Empire abroad. Later on, that empire, of course, as it expanded in India, cotton would have been imported, raw cotton imported. So the textile industry in England that was built on wool started to be built on cotton. About 10 breeds of long-wool sheep still in existence. Okay. Sheep were kept for their wool. That's not the case today, okay, which is partly why we don't have long-wool sheep today. Sheep are now kept for meat, and sheep shifted from being kept for wool to becoming kept primarily for meat in the 1700s. Okay. With the advent of the Industrial Revolution, the introduction of technology that could handle large quantities of fibre, and also gradually the importation of cotton from the colonies. And also, and very significantly, the interest in providing cheap protein for the industrial working class. So the whole interest in sheep for fibre shifted to meat for the industrial working class with the industrialization and the Industrial Revolution. Huge transformation in England, obviously, with all of those things. But it meant that the long-wool sheep, okay, was going to lose in popularity. They're not as good for meat production, they're slower. Cotswold is definitely slower to grow. They also, these long-wool sheep put so much of their energy into producing the fibre, so much of their food goes into producing the quality fibre, which is their fleece, okay, that people didn't want to keep them anymore. They moved to short, stapled, meat-producing sheep. The other thing that would have happened at the time, of course, as meat production became more dominant in sheep keeping, the technology changed. So the old mills that handled the long staples, okay, they were no longer needed because the mills were now increasingly designed to handle short stapled sheep, because those were the ones that the meat producing sheep produced. So the worsted mill, which coped with the long staple, right, kind of fell out of fashion. It was much easier and quicker to use woolen mills because it could handle the short staple meat production sheep. So today there's only one worsted mill in Canada that I know of, and that's at Inish Eile. So when I want to get my fleece processed, or any person with long wool, they can only go to a worsted mill, or they can comb it themselves, because in the worsted mill, the fibre is combed. If I send long fibre to Carstairs or woolen mill, it just messes up the machinery. They can only cope with short staple. The longest staple that Carstairs say they'll handle is 4 inches. Well, sometimes mine's 8 inches. So you have to, long-wool sheep are really designed, the fibre is designed to be combed. The great advantages of that, of course, is it produces a really superior fabric if it's fabric, or fibre, or yarn if it's yarn. And for a long time, of course, worsted still remained very popular in England because people who wanted high quality suits, dresses, whatever, like Bertie Wooster, anybody know Jeeves? Yeah. He, of course, used worsted. He wasn't going to wear wool, you know. So for the high quality fabric, it would still have been worsted. And I remember as a kid getting a jacket. I had to go to Dublin to get it. It was worsted, and it lasted forever. So there was still a market for high quality fabric, and there probably is in some places. But that is made through the worsted process, and you don't call it wool. You're supposed to call it worsted. That's worsted, and that's wool. So that's a bit about the long staple sheep and the long fibre sheep. Why they fell out of fashion? Because meat production became primary, because the technology changed and they no longer needed those mills that would comb. It's also, combing is a more expensive process. When you comb it, a lot of the small fibres fall out, so you lose some of the fibre, so it's less economic. And I guess what else I don't know whether the same technology producing cotton, probably not. But anyway, so that explains why we have only one worsted mill in Canada today, and which is a shame, because it really, long wool sheep were designed for fibre. They have so much good in them. The other thing about the long wool sheep, they tend to have a natural luster, which you will not find on all sheep. It's something to do with the way the light reflects out the outer tubercles on the yarn, on the fibre itself. So they have a lot going for them. They produce very high quality with the natural luster. It's also a very hard wearing wool because of the long fibre. You can imagine there'll be no little bits falling out to kill or anything like that. Let's see what other notes we have. Let's get on with this. Okay, so that's about, so this is part of what happened. So part of what I'm saying too is that to think about wool, and this leads on to the second part of the talk. I've mentioned a couple of things here. There's geopolitics in this. There's ecology in this. There's history in this. There's the long tradition of women working with fibre in this. There's the pushing people out of their traditional industries like the Luddocks in this. There's so much in wool and fibre. It's not just, just fibre. It's so much more than just fibre. And so that's the second part I want to think of. I want to think of this as kind of a metaphor for philosophy, an embodied philosophy. Philosophy that's in our hands. It's not in our heads. We all think of philosophy as just ideas. But how about thinking of philosophy as in things, in how we do things, in the relationships we have with things. So when you're knitting this, you're entering into a relationship with the generations of women who weren't before, and for years and years and years developed incredible skills around textiles, developed so much that is now taken for granted in textiles. You're entering into a relationship with the sheep, and the whole history of the sheep, there it is, it's in this. You're entering into a relationship with the landscape that fed those sheep. And if you start reading about that, actually, there's interesting stuff that talks about how sheep and their landscapes co-evolved. The sheep shape the landscapes, but the landscapes also shape the sheep. So this is a whole relationship with the environment, with people, with history, and unfortunately with geopolitics. Because without this, I do not think the English so successfully colonized Ireland. That's right. Okay, and without the cotton textiles, you wouldn't have had slavery in the United States. The colonization of India wouldn't have happened, at least not the way it did. So there's so much in this. So sometimes people think the only thing that's important about fibre or wool is it soft. But that's kind of the least interesting, What is in this? What are the relationships? And when you're using this, who are you entering into relationship with? And I include that like other creatures, the landscape. So thinking about this is like a metaphor for thinking about us in the world. We're like a tangle of relationships in the present and in the past. With people, sometimes good relationships, sometimes exploitative relationships, and with nature. So I think there's an awful lot more in fibre, in wool, than we often think about. So in some ways it's nice to think that when you're knitting with this, that the lambs, the sheep, and all the history that's behind it, and the richness of that history, and all of the people. And then that, I just need to clear my throat a little, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Sorry, I didn't get that part about means it looks better when it's cold. That's
yes,
cold.
yeah.
Sorry, where do you ship yours to?
To Inish Eile, Alberta, and they comb it. There are
Oh,
also
they
people
comb
here,
it?
yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah, they comb it. But there are some people here, you combed fibre, yeah.
I comb it at home.
Yeah.
So
It's a slow process.
it's slow, and you lose about half
And you
of it.
lose a lot, yeah.
Yeah, you
At
lose
least
it.
half of it.
Yes.
It's not waste. You think it's hard that.
Yeah.
But to comb it, to get the fibre to staple about one length, you're going to lose about half of the fleece. Yeah.
How much does it take a scheme over there? How much wool do you have to have?
Oh, that all depends on the Bradford count. Now let me see if I can get this right. Oh, thanks a lot for that complicated question.
Sorry, can you repeat the question? Sorry.
She's wondering how much yarn do you get out of a skein?
Okay.
And I mean, it depends
How
on
much
course,
wool
on
do you
it depends on
get
weight.
for a skein?
And the kind of used to be the standard way of thinking about this was the Bradford count, which was combed tops. It would be how many hanks of combed tops can you get out of a pound of fibre? And a hank is 560 yards. So
Regardless of weight.
Huh?
Regardless of weight?
No, it's
Or-
because it's one strand.
Okay.
One strand.
One single, yeah.
Yeah, one single strand. How many single strands of can you get out of a pound of yarn? And the answer lies in the Bradford count, I guess. And there's 560 yards in a hank. How many yanks you can get? How many hanks? How many hanks of yarn? This always gets me. How many hanks of single strand fibre can you get in a pound? Each hank is 560 yards. Now some Bradford counts are 12, so that would be 560 multiplied by 12.
This is why nowadays we just look at the side,
I know.
when we buy it and we read it on the side.
Yeah.
And it says how much, because trying to compute that.
I know. The minute David does this, is it sport? Is it TV? What is it? They'll keep giving me this Bradford count thing. But anyway, that doesn't really answer your question. It all depends, on the thickness of the fibre and how many plies and all of that.
So how many skeins would you have in a sheep?
Out of a lamb,
Yes.
I would probably send away, let's say, a lamb's fleece might be up to 3 pounds, 2.5 to 3 pounds. I'd probably get a pound and a half of yarn back from that. Maybe a little more with the lamb because they're less wasted. So, yeah. So you lose about half of it. Yeah, you lose half of it. And, yeah. Oh, by the way, probably lose at least half because actually when they wash it, it's amazing the amount of stuff. It looks clean. It's amazing the amount of stuff that's picked up in a sheep's fleece. The lamb's fleeces are generally cleaner because they haven't been in the barn. So if my lambs are born in February, okay, then Peter will come and shear them in October.
You share them once a year?
The lambs get shorn in October, but normally my sheep, I aim for about every 10 months, every 9 or 10 months. I have to fit in with what's happening on the island, like because Peter's going to come especially for my sheep, special and all as they are. So I have to fit in, but I'd say about 9 months. I'd love to leave it a year, but they would also, if they go into a barn with very long fleece, I'll get a lot of hay seeds and everything else. So.
How long do they live?
And somebody asked me this earlier, and I have a vet book at home, and the vet book begins the book by saying that he had a ewe that was 22 years old that just had a lamb.
Wow.
Okay, well, that's not normal. What happens to sheep is their teeth grow. They would live an awful lot longer if they had dentists. That is absolutely what happens. So they can't eat grass, or they can't chew hay. They can often manage to gum the grass a bit, but hay is very difficult because it's hard. And so that I often have sheep that would be much healthier if they had dentures. And so around 12 to 14 is when they usually start to run into trouble with their teeth. Yeah. And they will starve to death if you can't really supplement their feed. And even when you are supplementing their feed, as they get their food, as they get older, I don't know what it is about the metabolic system, but they seem to need more and more food. So they can often be hungry a lot of the time just because they either can't process the food or whatever. So, sometimes life isn't so good for them in that way. That's the time to put them down. Commercial farms will usually they call it shipping, ship their ewes when they're about 7. Because they've reached their productivity peak and it's down after that. And that means you either have to feed them more, they'll only have 1 lamb instead of 2 or 3, or some sheep will feed them more. So commercial farms won't keep them, generally won't keep them past about 7. But,
That's your dog food. Basically, it goes in the dog food.
But I had this, right, this made from adult sheep. These, some of these are much, like they're 7, 8, 9. They're wonderful yarn, And so I have a geriatric sheep farm.
But the quality of the yarn changes as the sheep gets older.
It does. It's not as good, but again, a lot depends on the individual sheep. There's a huge variation from sheep to sheep. I have some sheep whose yarn fibre bed stays beautifully soft, much softer as they age. Some get so tough, I wouldn't want to enter a battle.
How do you keep the oil? How does it keep?
The lanolin stays in.
The lanolin,
Yeah, you just always in them. Your hands in them, your hands are just so soft. That, of course, gets washed out in the process of making it into yarn. And people sometimes put that back by putting a little hair conditioner in rinse water or new Calan. Has anybody used new Calan? Yeah. And that's just putting a bit of the natural oil back into it.
Oh.
You do the same for your hair. Well, some of us do. I was with a rush this morning. So, yes. Other questions? Yes.
This one is very light color. Can you tell us the variations of colors?
Part of what's going on with this guy is that the photograph is a very poor quality. And when I got it blown up, you can see pictures go all over the place. This is Hank, this is the ram. And he is white. He may not look it like that. Normal colour for Cotswolds is white, is the dominant colour. However, you can get coloured in black Cotswolds. I have some. I used to kind of try to focus on colour. It's very hard to keep colour because the dominant colour is white. So, and I no longer have a black ram. Blackie has retired. And Hank is his replacement, which means I have less and less colour in my flock, in my purebred Cotswold flock. I sometimes cross my purebred Cotswolds with a different breed ram, just to experiment and stuff, and see how they do. So I've done BFL, I've done a fin ram, and this year, in last fall, I used a rambling. Of all of them, now that's 3 different I think I've used. I would say that the Cotswold sheep is the nicest one going. They're quiet, they're friendly, they're easy to handle, they're mellow, they're relaxed. The BFL is beautiful. The cross of the yarn is fabulous. But the BFL, even the half BFL lamb, is spooky, very friendly, spooky, hard to manage, all of that. The Ramadil is also a spooky kind of, and I don't know why, but they're kind of nervous, just different personalities. So Cotswold is such a nice sheep. I mean, such a mellow, relaxed, dignified sheep.
Isn't that how much country there is? Like, let's say Ireland and grass and all of
They
that.
would love the grass in Ireland.
Yes.
Yeah.
So would it make a difference to the coat?
Probably not the coat, but they'd probably even grow better because the grass in Ireland is so
Yeah.
good. I might prejudice or bias from it. Really, like,
Yeah.
I have sheep out there, like, there's no comparison. There's no comparison to grass in Ireland, and you have grass most of the year, and it's good quality. We have grass here part of the year, and a lot of it's very poor quality. And right now, there's nothing growing, you know. So, but on the other hand, if you don't keep too many sheep, and I have too many sheep, you know, you can get by, and you know, all that kind of stuff. But there's nothing like the grass in Ireland. I think New Zealand has got great grass too, but the food value of the grass is just. And you see, there's a lot of topsoil. There's very little topsoil out in the Gulf Islands.
How many sheep do you have?
Too many. I have 22 lambs, and I think there are about 35 adults there. There shouldn't be. I don't have it all on my own land. People let me use their land. I have 3 people on the island who let me use their land.
So they don't have much grass, because the islands don't have a lot, like you say. What are they eating?
Well, you make hay, I made hay. I started to eat hay already. The grass will come back at the end of August because there's dew comes, and then it'll be going September, October into November, and then there's going to be back hay in December. I also buy hay that you know those big white marshmallows, see them all over the sand and stuff. I buy those. They get delivered on a truck. They have to be lifted off with a forklift. But after that, they're really handy because with hay you have to have it in a barn. With these you don't need a barn. Which is great. The sheep want a barn in winter. They want to be able to go in and out. They will go in from the rain, even though they can handle the rain. They will go in from the rain. Sometimes you'll see them out grazing in the rain, but very often they'll go in. The other time you need to keep them in the barn is around laying. They have to be in. If they're not in, they could be attacked by ravens while they're having lambs. Ravens can be very unpleasant. Take you in the eyes. We don't want to hear the details. It's not going to happen. It happened once, it will not happen again. Yeah, so, and also, you want to have them in, because you're there in February at night. You do not want to be going out to the field with your headlight, trying to help a sheep having lamb. You want her in the barn, and you want to be able to put her in a small pen. You need to help her be, once she's had her lamb, she should always be kept close with her lamb or two lambs. Because initially lambs are not super smart. Super smart at any time. Lambs, I don't know what it is about their eyesight, but lambs will drive you crazy. Adult sheep are smart, but not lambs. Anyway, so you want to keep the lamb very close to the mom, you know, for warmth. They feed very, very often. And when they're born, you know, they're up very soon, not like human infants, but you want to make sure they get the milk. And to do that, you have to make sure that there's milk available for them. And sometimes the mom's teats are blocked, so you have to always just prove and make sure that the milk is going to flow to the lamb. Because your lamb could starve very quickly. So that's not what you have to do. And you don't want to be doing that out in the field in the rain in February. So there's a lot of good reasons. And last year, I got one of those little cameras. You know those cameras in the barn? So I could see everything. Well, I mean, it was great, but I must have been up there more often than ever because something's happening, something's happening. Eventually I got over that, but you know, it was too much surveillance. But it was great because I got better at figuring things
So
out.
are you helping with all of those lambs, or do you have help? Because 35.
Yeah, no, they didn't all mine. You see, I have a mixture. Only 14 sheep had lambs last year. I did with the 35. There's the Kit Kats, who are what are called weathers. They're really cute. They keep them for their fibre. There's Teddy Bear, who's this guy's Mr. Bear, the sister of the brother. They're his buddy, and you know, I manage him without Teddy Bear, and so on and so on. So 14, I had 14 sheep having lambs. Yeah, I was there for every single one of those. And I was really lucky because there was a young German woman there. And one night when Jasmine was having her lamb, it was Jasmine's first lamb, and she was having a single lamb, and the lamb was very big. And she needed help. Now, the lamb is in the right position, but this was the big born, that was really good, you know. But it was a very big lamb. And I took myself and Zenia, both of us, to pull the lamb. I don't think she could have done it on her own. No, she couldn't have done it on her own.
So will you have another 14 this year?
I had 40, sorry, what was the question?
Will you have another 14 lambs?
I might have to do quite as many as 14.
So you can control it?
Oh yeah, oh, very easy. Him?
Okay. I got it.
At least 2 fields between the ram and the ewes and very good fences. They're amazing in what they can cut and get. Yeah, I might do fewer. And you can also time it, like the gestation period is about 5 months. So depending on when you want your lambs born, you put the ram in 5 months in advance. But maybe 5.
And do you keep all the lambs?
No. I try to buy for the purebred Cotswolds, I try to sell them for breeding so people can keep them. Male lambs all go where lambs go. And a couple of the females I'll keep as reproduction or because they're absolutely fabulous. I try to sell some fibre sheep because some of the fleeces are amazing. It's quite heartbreaking actually because there's so many amazing fleeces. But if they're male lambs, they won't be kept. You know, I mean, I keep some wethers, a couple of us do, but mostly people don't keep male lambs.
What's a weather?
I castrated.
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
So with the genetics of that, you mentioned that they're purebred, and so over time, do you get do swaps with other
I used to. The Cotswold. Oh yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And where are they mostly? All over the country?
They're all over the country, yeah. It has been around Saskatchewan. I think there's some people out on the Maritimes. There's 2 or 3 other breeders in BC at least. Not enough, you know, because again, everybody says when they're slow growing, which means it's not just that you don't make any money, you don't make any money farming any, believe me, you lose, but you end up keeping your lambs over the winter. And that is a lot of work and a lot of expense. And most people don't want to do that. And in Canada, you were able to not do that. In Ireland, then they keep some of the winter because that's just the way they did it, because they're grass. But here, people feed them grain, because grain used to be cheap. It probably isn't grain anymore. It isn't cheap anymore, but it isn't. But that used to be the thing. People would move their lambs around quickly by feeding some grain so they were gone by December. If you go to any of the local abattoirs, they're always very busy in the late fall, because everyone wants to get rid of their lambs by December. Because you were feeding in December, January, February, March. It'll be April before you get any kind of good growth. And that's what you don't do. And that's another reason you won't keep the Cotswolds, because you end up having, it's hard to get them, if you're into meat production, it'd be hard to get them. So you don't have to keep them in the winter.
So you make enough money to, by selling yarn and some of the lambs to sustain you?
No.
So you're not recommending this as a career choice?
Whatever the hours you work.
You can go hours, I didn't get about any of that. No. Yeah, but we all do things, right? Heavens, if we only did the things that would make money and sustain us. Yeah.
So what subsidizes your?
I have a job, a day job.
Okay,
And now I'm retired, I have a pension. They have a pension, I don't.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, but I mean, there's a great pleasure in working with them, even though it's very hard work, and sometimes it's quite stressful if things are going wrong. Like, there's nothing worse than things going wrong in an animal. But it's a great pleasure, and you're just part of living in the world in a way that's, worth living.
Are you a knitter?
I beg your pardon?
Are you a knitter?
I'm for knitter. I do knit. I like knitting. I knit on the ferries in particular. It does. We're always late, so it really does help. It keeps the blood pressure down. Like this morning, we were only half an hour late with the ferry. Or there maybe it was 40 minutes. That wasn't bad. Yeah. Any other questions?
Can you talk a bit about the history of the farm? Like, how did you find land and why did you choose it?
Well, you see, I got this farm 25 years ago. It didn't cost much back then. Land out on the islands didn't cost much back then. It didn't cost much up until about 8 years ago, maybe. Now, it's got very expensive. And the people who are buying farms now are tending to go into high-status things, not growing cabbage. Okay, they're doing, there's olives on the island, there's a cidery, there's wine, garlic, all of the things that could generate some income. It's very hard to pay a mortgage on this. But you can be very productive in a small piece of land, and a lot of young people want to farm. And it'd be great if they could have access, not just access to land, but also access to infrastructure that support their farm.
When I said about New Zealand,
Yeah.
about when we were there,
Yeah,
that all of the wool is shipped to China.
yeah. I've heard that. They used to have a great yarn industry in New Zealand. I was
They
there.
did.
Yeah, they did. I was there maybe 25 years ago, and I went into a store that also amazing.
A lot of them are shipped to the UK too, but it's only in China.
Yeah,
So if anyone wants to do this on a volume,
yeah.
do we do that here in Canada? Do we ship it to?
Oh, most of the wool in Canada gets shipped to China. It goes through the Canadian Wool Growers Cooperative. You can ship your wool out. It might cover the cost of shearing, it might not, and then they will sell it to China. But now this is a mixture of wool of all sides. But you do definitely have a growing interest in high quality local fibre. It'd be lovely to have another mill on the island possibly, because if you send your wool to Carsters, there's a long wait because they're so busy. Inish Eile isn't so busy because they're a worsted mill, I guess, because it's more expensive that way. But there's a couple of small mills around. Do you know some of the names of
Campbell's one,
Yeah.
their wait list is 18 months when you send it in. There's one in, I think, Invermere, Shelterwood, that's just recent. They just opened up a couple years ago. I don't know what their wait list is. It's probably over a year. Most of them start out, when they open up, they think they're going to be able to move things through really quickly, and then people hear about them, and they get inundated. Yeah. So you can send, there's some really good mills as you start moving east, but we really have very little in British Columbia. And that's part of the issue because shipping costs are so huge. One time, like with Gloria, she just took that whole bunch to Carstairs.
She did, yeah.
So how much did she take?
It was like she has a trailer, a big trailer, like a long trailer. That was one, and her truck. She has a.
And is this all from the Vancouver Island?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, so-
then she'd have a lot more too. I'm sure she's piling.
Yeah.
She gives as much as she could.
So someone collected, got in touch with all the different farmers and said, I'll take your wool. I'm gonna go drive out
Yeah.
there.
Wow.
It'll go out. And then they dropped it off there.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one way to do it.
And she goes out about 3 times a year and does that,
Yeah.
and then she brings it back too. So I mean that's a great service to have that.
Well, I remember Perry Bay was saying one time that they were just throwing their fleeces out because they couldn't afford
Yeah.
shipping, getting off the island, Perry Bay is in Machosen, getting it off the island and getting it to the mill. It costs more to do that, and they already had to pay to have it sheared.
How much does it cost to actually, get the actual product?
You know, I haven't actually costed it. Sometimes it's a little disheartening. I'm going to do it because I like doing it. I can afford to do it. I have a farm. I don't have a mortgage. And I love dealing with the sheep. And I love making the hay and doing all those kinds of things. I'm really lucky. Emily might be better at answering that question because she's a bit more businesslike than me. There's the other thing we're talking about, of course, what's happening to in this is, is you can actually, wool that doesn't have a good fibre value for making quality fibre yarn, you can make it into fertilizer pellets. And they would be fantastic because they're both a fertilizer and a soil amendment. And so that would be a great thing. And instead of buying synthetic fertilizers, so that would work very well. And the other thing, they would kind of hold moisture in the soil, which a lot of us, the synthetic fertilizers won't. I mean, they'll make things grow better if you can. But this would help the quality of the soil. And because there's this fibre ground up there, it'll actually make the soil retain water more. And the other thing you can do with the poor quality fleece is you can use it for mulch around trees. And in New Zealand, at least, they turn it into felt mats for seedlings. So it keeps the ground moist, it keeps it cool, and it adds nutrients. So there's, again, all these things make so much sense, but they haven't been done because there's been cheap fertilizer, cheap this, cheap that, and so a lot of good, sensible things don't get done. But when we're talking about Harry Bay not being worth shipping it out, remember, this stuff was so valuable that 2/3 of the income of Henry V came from this. And in the book I've used, they actually give a current day value for whatever the wood was. It was astronomical. We're so used to having cheap fibre, fast clothes, fast fashion. Like, that's a big part of the problem. Stuff that's good is not valued, and stuff that's actually bad for us or bad for the environment, right? It's valued.
Isn't that when I think also when you brought up, like, Sheena was brought up in Scotland and she's been in since she was small. But I think that it's a different generation, maybe the younger generation. It's a different generation. Was it?
Well, it was a different generation, but now a lot of people I meet who are using a lot of fibre, they're the young people. It's called fibre art, not just knitting, they just love fibre. Like, it's aesthetically beautiful, right? And for a lot of young people who are really concerned about climate change and the state of the world, it's one way of doing something that's both beautiful and good and pleasurable. So I think there's a shift. I certainly see that, even compared to 5 or 6 years ago, the interest in local yarn is so much more than it was. Yeah, so I'm quite optimistic about it. I mean, a lot of young people who just love fibre. Yeah. And whether it's felting or crocheting or knitting or doing stuff like this guy.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yeah. She does this felting, she does really
I
good
love
quality, but she does this very fancy stuff. She's German and she has a sort of sideline of doing like it. So yeah, no, it's what I was trying to say is that there's a sense, there's a philosophy in this, there's a politics in it, there's a way of living in this stuff. And it's so much richer, more beautiful than so much of what we're offered. And again, when I say like better, if you can think of the world as an entanglement, right? We're all kind of entangled, woven together, past and present, the natural world, the human world, all kind of tangled together. And this is one beautiful way of tangling things. Yes?
Maybe you said this already, sorry. So all your fleeces, you send them off, and do you get them processed into like fiber for spinning, or is it all into yarn?
You know, some I have wonderful combed tops. And I don't send them all off. I wash, as you know, I wash fleeces. I have these bags of beautiful silky curls at home. And so I wash them by hand. There's nothing more beautiful. You know, they're kind of grubby. And then you wash them. And then you throw them out to dry in the sun. And suddenly you've got clouds of silk. It's gorgeous, you know, we can't stop handling them. So yeah, I do that. And then, yes, when I send them away, I get what's called combed tops for spinners. Sometimes I got belting bats done at Carsters, but I get combed tops done at Inish Eile as well as the yarn. So I get the belting stuff, the spinning stuff, and the yarn. And then I also have the hand washed curls, which if any of you have felt, you can just felt without ever taking the curls out. Who did I say cobweb curls? Cobweb belting? Did you look it up?
Yeah, it did.
Isn't it beautiful?
It does.
It's incredible. You can actually, without carding the fibre, you just spread it out in the wet felt and you keep the curls. And you can see through it. It shows the light through because it's a very fine felt.
Are your,
Oh, sorry, I was going to say.
Well, I was, sorry. I was just going to ask, that was what I was going to ask partly, was just what do you do with the fleeces that you don't send away to turn into yarn? Do you have more available? I recently am diving more into spinning, and I'm finding it difficult to find fleece, like local fleece that isn't something that was just destined for the burn pile, and I've kind of rescued it, and it's got a lot of sweat equity that I have to put into it to produce yarn.
It's not that hard to wash them, and you wash a lot of fleeces.
Yeah, you can got the Vancouver Island Fibre Shed has a producer's directory. You can go up on it and you'll see all the different farms that are registered with the directory, whether they have fleeces available that you can pick up. And the other thing is in August, there's the Fibrations.
Oh, right, yeah.
And Martha has a stall there, and she usually brings fleeces.
Do you bring
Now to bring some fleeces into Ryan this week, right?
Yeah.
So Ryan will have
Wednesday.
some too. So
Yeah.
Naughty by Nature will have fleeces.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He'll have,
Yeah.
oh.
One of the reasons you don't see them around so much is because they're very bulky to take. So when you're going to a fibre, you're going to only carry so much. Fleeces are very bulky, and then you only have a stall that's 10 by 10, and the fleeces are very bulky. So that's one reason. But it should be easy. You should easily get fleeces. Lots of people wash fleeces, and you can get like Michelle Masalik has. What are they not? Shetland. She has Icelandic fleeces.
Yeah.
You know, so they're very breed specific. Very breed specific. So because you really can tell the sheep when you see the fleece. You see what I mean? So you can get different kinds of fleece.
Do you sell what do you do when you have your experimental ones? Do you sell those fleeces as well?
Yeah, I'll be selling those in October. I won't be able to wash those by that time of year because I like to sun dry them. So just get in touch with me if you're interested in the fleece.
Yes,
Yeah.
I will.
And then you had a question.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering if there's feasible, if they're all undyed.
Yes, all my ones are dyed. Yeah, I did try to dye one. I'd love to be able to dye, I just don't get it. Like the animals keep me very busy, and I said, I make my own hay, I do all this stuff. I drive the tractor. I mow. This year I mowed 4 fields.
Wow.
And I do the turning and the rowing. That's after you mow, the hay's all on the ground. You check the well forecast really carefully. Okay. And then you have to turn it so the other side dries. So maybe the third time, the second time you turn it, make sure it's dry, and then you change the setting on your turner, and it puts it along into these rows, which are called windrows, which the wind finishes drying. And then I own the baler, but my neighbor operates it because it's so temperamental. And he's an engineer, so when it goes wrong, he can fix it. And he comes and he bails it. And it all takes quite a bit of time. Yes.
And so your end product, you're selling through local wool shops or at Vibrations?
Mostly, I mostly sell through either I have a little yarn barn out in Pender, And so people come by and buy it there, but mostly it's through the vibrations or the Cotswold fair or the 100 mile, yeah. So it's always been that so far. Yeah. I'm quite small scale. And it's all my own, like I don't buy anybody else's fibre, it's all my own. It's like, I'm doing it because of the sheep, in a sense. I didn't realize how beautiful the fibre would be, but I started doing it because I love the sheep and they're fantastic. And that's what these sheep were designed to do. And then I found out how fantastic the fibre was, so it kind of came backwards thinking about it.
Yeah, you know.
Yes. Which would you like? This is a knitted, and here's the same yarn, not knitted.
You only have the two colours, the grey and the...
Here, that's all I brought. Mostly I have only grey and cream because those are the colours the sheep come in. They don't all come in grey like this. Some of the sheep might be something like in black, but it gets mixed in with the white, and this is what you get because I don't dye. This is 2-ply, this is 3-ply, and I have 4-ply, but it's not here.
I'm knitting with the 2-ply right now. I like.
Yeah, do you like that?
I love it.
Yeah,
It's wonderful.
You know, if you met these lambs, there's actually, you see a picture of them on the website.
Oh, okay.
Sure, yeah.
This one says that it's blended with
Little alpaca,
yeah. So where does the alpaca come
The
from?
mill has alpacas and they put it in. It's just not 10%.
Yeah.
This is and blended with little silk. So
I'm regretting not buying the white one now.
there is, if you are interested in getting into farming, BC has one very good program. I'm sure it's more than one good program. But the reason I can use 3 other people's little farms is that they get a tax break. I use it. And that's really helpful. So I don't know if she's interested in farming or not, but that's one way, is getting to use other people's farm. It's not so easy to do that for sheep, it's not impossible. People who generally do it for growing vegetables. But there's quite a bit of land around. And you are a farmer, and you perform a BC assessment, but that's not that hard. You use somebody else's land, they will get a tax break on that land. And it can be quite significant given the value of land around here. So for 2 other, I was going to say elderly people, but since I'm elderly myself, I can't really say that. But they're all over 80, okay? I'm not over 80 yet. I use their land for my sheep and to make hay, and they get a tax break. So I don't have to own the land.
What is the succession plan for some of these people in their 80s and yourself?
It's really hard. I'm thinking about that a lot. I have a younger couple in mind. You run into all sorts of things like capital gains tax and all of that kind of stuff. You know, and I don't even know what that implies. But it's really, I want the farm to keep going. Yeah, and it's set up, and this is another reason why I want this to work, because I joked about making a living now, but I think it's possible to have a small farm and make a living. And this will be part of it. Okay, this is part of it, it's not the whole thing, part of it. And I think, and that's one other reason I'm working so hard at this to get us going. Because I have a farm now, I have a pond for irrigation, I have a little yarn barn, I have a garden for growing vegetables, I have enough water for irrigation. Somebody could make a living. It will be there by the time I'm finished. Yeah, and that's what I want somebody passed on. I do not want this, my farm to become a hobby home for somebody like that, whatever. There's lots of other things people have the cottages that's great, but this is a farm. So I'm hoping, yeah.
You mentioned that you've seen that a lot of younger people are really getting involved, and I absolutely agree. I work in the textile industry, I work in the clothing industry, and so many young people are really interested in seeing where is the product, where does it come from?
Yes.
They want to learn the history of it, just like in food, people want to know where are these chickens raised? Is this organic? What are they feeding it? And it's the same type of thing here, that you have that direct connectivity to where this animal produced this, that I can now make it.
Yeah, and a lot of people don't want to feel that they're entangled with bad stuff. often we are, and we don't know, we don't need to be, and we have no choice. But really would be nice to feel that, we can be connected into a world with good stuff, yeah. Especially young people are very aware of that, yes.
You mentioned you have a pond for irrigation. Is water a problem on Pender Island?
For some people, not for me. It depends. I'm very lucky. I'm in a bit of a valley. There's the water. I have so much. I have lots of water. Not in summer. I have to rely on my pond. It's a big pond. But for some people, they run out of water on Pender Island. But then people aren't very careful with how they use water either. I mean, you can collect so much rainwater over the winter. You can dig a pond if you've got the right kind of clay that retains the water. Just people can be more careful with water. But there are places where people run out of water. But not many, but there are some. But there's a lot we can do to live with a lot less water. Any more questions? I don't. Ready to take Pest home. Did you see Pest on the little website? Pest is a bot that he's on that. Yeah. You see him drinking a bottle, and you see him going to Judith, jumping over a stream and all that.
All right, thank you for joining us, everyone. Let's do the giveaway to close it.
Okay, just pass me $20. This one? My eyes are closed.
She had Rose.
She put her name in 5 times.
They go together, eh?
They're both,
Thank you so very much.
Oh, you're very welcome. I hope you enjoy it.
This is indeed a beautiful gift for me.
Thank you. And you come from a yarn kind of culture.
Absolutely, yes, you bet.
And I believe Scotland, by the way, has a huge revival since yarn.
They do.
Would you want to see a new version of your budget?
I don't know enough about it to
second giveaway.
Okay, get this. But it was Scotland.
Second giveaway.
I don't know if you want that to add cheap or not.
Oh, no, rock color.
It's locked. It's loaded? There you are.
There you go.
Thank you. Oh, yay. Oh, it's so good.
You want this in the way? We can do it, and I'm sure.
It's lit.
Oh, you're not going to have me that right.
Will it be so sad? No, don't steal it.
I'm sorry, God, I didn't call you.
That's true.
Okay.